Hi everybody, this is Lee at Fresh Astrology, and we are talking about the North and South Node. They have both changed signs. From the North Node was in Leo for about 18 months, and because North Node and the South Node are bound in opposition, they're always directly across from one another in the chart. The South Node was in Aquarius for that same period of time, directly across from the North Node. And now that the North Node is shifted into Cancer, the South Node is also shifted into Capricorn. So Cancer and Capricorn are very, very different from Leo and Aquarius. Leo and Aquarius are both more outward, for just by their elements and qualities. Aquarius is an air sign, Leo is a fire sign. So we had air and fire for 18 months. And now we've got Cancer, a water sign, and Capricorn, an earth sign. So water and earth, two very different fundamental qualities and energies at play here. And so I don't think I'll say the exact same thing I said on Facebook. I did a Facebook Live on the North Node. You can go watch that, where I talked a lot about nurturing, like different ways of nurturing. But here we're going to talk more about kind of the big picture going on with Capricorn. So the North Node is in Cancer, so while we keep our eye on Capricorn and all the stuff that's going on there, the North Node is saying something important here as we get into this Capricorn, major time of Capricorn that's upon us. And we've been living through it to some degree over the past year, but it's intensifying and will continue to intensify into 2020, when it starts to abate and lighten up a little bit. So with the North Node, it'd be different if the North Node was up in Capricorn. The North Node is like the front end of the arrow. It's pointing in the direction one should be going. What's very strange is that all the stuff in Capricorn is where we still need to pay a lot of attention. This is the hot spot. But the North Node is back there very quietly pointing a different direction. And I find that very interesting, that it's not the North Node in Capricorn, but the South Node. So what does that mean? What does that mean for all of us? Well, as a group of people inhabiting the planet, for all of us, it means don't get distracted by whatever's going on later in 2019 and into the turn of the year. As we begin the year in 2020, we're going to have Saturn conjunct Pluto. The South Node is still up in the mix. And then in April 2020, we have Jupiter conjunct Pluto, Saturn having moved on. But there's a lot going on here. It's very intense. It's a lot of energy. And then there's a South Node there, which is also an equally powerful point. It's just the back end of the arrow, so to speak, if you use that arrow analogy. So, given that Capricorn is about following goals, staying on track, accumulating material possessions to some degree, but it's about a type of self-care, ensuring that one is taking care of oneself by staying on the path, sticking to goals, accumulating steadily over time. It's a very earthy, down-to-earth, common sense, practical kind of energy. So there's nothing particularly bad about it on the face of it. It's kind of neutral. But then there's the South Node in there, which suggests there's a lot of karmic stuff happening, a lot of things that were meant to be timed in this particular way, as we have these major conjunctions setting up in 2020. And I know from working with people's charts, I know from my own chart and studying the charts of others, the South Node, when we get too caught up in our South Node and don't pay enough attention to our North Node, we get lost. So we need to be able to think of all the stuff happening in Capricorn, sort of metaphorically like the back end of the arrow. It informs us. It's data only. But the guiding light, the true point of the arrow, and what takes us to our true north, is this North Node in Cancer. And Cancer has a certain, there is, in Facebook I mentioned this element of us all stepping into leadership. Each one of us cannot afford to be a follower. The planet, kind of all of us depend on the rest of us stepping into our full power and our leadership and our self-responsibility. No one's excluded. Everyone needs to do this. Everyone needs to step up. No one can sit back. People will, but it's really incumbent on all of us to try to learn how to be leaders, even if we're just leaders of ourselves and stepping into our full power so that we're not, playing the victim. And that's different from actually having something horrible done to you and needing to recuperate and grieve or and get help or whatever. That's different. Getting stuck in a victim role is kind of a mindset that people can get into. Sometimes when there's really nothing from an objective view that they're really a victim of, but they just tend to be kind of in that role in their head. That's the kind of victim mentality I'm talking about. If somebody's just been harmed physically or emotionally or in some way grievously harmed, they are an actual victim in that moment. So don't get me confused on that. But people can hide from taking power in their own lives and assuming responsibility by falling into certain mindsets. Victim mentality is one. Blaming others is another. Negative self-talk, just saying, well, I just can't, or I'm too stupid, or I'm too this, or I'm too that. I could never do that. I'm not wealthy enough. I didn't get a good enough childhood. I didn't get a college education. People hide behind all kinds of things to avoid taking responsibility and leadership in their own lives. It's scary to take leadership. It's scary as all get out to realize we have all the power, that you have all the power, that I have all the power over my own life, you over your own life. That's a terrifying notion, and that's why we hide from it. But we're coming to a time where we can't afford to do that anymore. People need to kind of wake up, as it were. I hesitate to use that terminology because some people can kind of roll their eyes if they feel like it's like too out there, this idea of awakening. But I do actually think that's what's happening, is we need to wake up to our own power and to the fact that stuff needs to change quickly. And stuff, is very specific, but I think we all have a sense of that something needs to change and nobody knows how to do it. We've been looking at leaders all around the globe to fix things, and nothing's really on a fundamental level getting fixed. So what now? Well, something new is occurring where each person assumes power. And that's a very new concept. We've never seen anything like it. That's why it's hard to grasp. It's easy to hide behind statements like, well, that'll never happen, or do you think, the people in power would ever give over control, or that's just not the way things are. I mean, people will start spewing a lot of excuses not to take power over their own lives and to step up in this particular way. We've never seen anything like it. And that's something that is very, very true about this set of transits and aspects. And so So that's a part of what's happening with this North Node in Cancer, because Cancer is about a certain kind of leadership. It's a nurturing kind of leadership. It's self-nurturing, but it also thinks about others. You know, it's that parenting, but it's not, it's a different kind of parenting. If you look at Capricorn, it's a little more authoritative, authoritarian, and that's where the South Node is. It's saying that's the past. Basically, the back end of the arrow is the past. It's information. It can help, that information can help shoot you forward into the future, but you want that tip of the arrow to be your guide. And that is the North Node in Cancer. So it's a different way of leading. And, you know, there's an increasing number of women coming into political office, becoming CEOs and major stockholders and sitting on boards. And so women are coming more and more into leadership. So it could have something to do with kind of a balancing out. And we've always known this, men have known this too, the more women who kind of come into power, the way power is thought of and distributed and wielded will be very different. So that's a piece of it. I don't think that's the whole of it, but that's a piece of it. And it's also not just about women and what they're doing and the ratio of women. It's about the internal ratio within every human being, and including men. This is also about men choosing to, because men aren't, like I said at the beginning, everyone is the whole zodiac. We are the whole zodiac. We contain each of these signs, all of us, men and women. So men have just as much Cancer energy in their chart. They have just as much capacity to be nurturing in this particular way, which is perceived to be more feminine. You know, it's the opposite of Capricorn. It's not much like Aries, but it does have a certain kind of authority. But it's just wielded differently. The way you look through the lens of a Cancer kind of leadership, you're looking at the world very differently than if you're looking through the lens of leadership from, you know, through the eyes of Capricorn energy or Aries energy, for that matter. Each sign has a different way of stepping into their power, and right now it's very important to start understanding more about what it is to be more self-nurturing and nurturing to others as a group, protective, but also encouraging, because leadership isn't smothering. It's not, oh, I'll do it, you sit there and do nothing. Remember, it's about each one of us stepping into our power. Cancer's a little more likely to allow that. What else do we want to say here? If I ever do a reading for you, you know when I'm silent, I'm just kind of taking in the pattern of the chart. We also have, while all of this going on, it really is setting up like a bow and arrow, or even a sword of justice or something. There's this square between Jupiter in Sagittarius and Neptune right now. Let me think about this. Neptune won't have moved very much by 2020, the time frame I'm thinking about, when a lot of this intensifies, this energy intensifies in Capricorn. But Jupiter will have moved into Capricorn by then, so the square will have ended, and it's more of a sextile. So, and then there's sort of this trine to Uranus too. So things that seem stuck now, like just totally entrenched and unable to move, and there's kind of this expanded sense of this, and also this sense of confusion about how to move forward. I think there's an expansion of confusion right now. People are so thoroughly confused about, especially for larger kind of societal issues, there's so much confusion. And I suspect a lot of individuals are suffering from this too, some confusion about how to move forward. And it has to do with one's ethics, values, how you connect to that which is greater than you. Now, some people don't believe in anything. They don't believe there's anything more powerful. They just think there's science, and I mean, I'm nothing against science. I'm all for science, but they just don't believe in anything other than themselves. And, they think that everything they see is reality and that there's nothing else. They think their eyes are the only determinants of reality, or maybe their five senses are the only determinants of reality. But increasingly, our values, our ethics, and our spiritual connection is what will be guiding us. And we don't see that fully, not as a group. Not as a group. And it's not about following a religion. It's each person stepping into his or her own power, which really doesn't suggest, an overarching religion. It's about each person coming into their own power spiritually, which is, again, very different from what we've seen in the past, and it's always hard to comprehend. But there's this process going on. A lot of people have been pulled into this process. Some people have not yet. But it's just like the Renaissance or something. It's a movement that spreads. It's a light that spreads. And so it's still spreading. And I think in 2020 there is a kind of a tipping point here where there are definitely some turning points and decisions to be made in your own individual lives and societally, globally. There's some decisions to be made. But this is going on, so I'm talking kind of about external stuff, but this is all going on inside of us. The North Node and the way we experience it inside of us. So this North Node in Cancer, it's in our cells, it's cellular, and it's something we're experiencing. As we go through each day, we're increasingly experiencing what this puzzle is doing. It's going on inside of us. This puzzle is going on inside of us. And we're working it out without even our logical mind even knowing that that's happening. It just is there in the background happening, just as real, but our logical mind isn't in charge of it. I'm silent. I'm just looking at the pattern again. And likewise, this Capricorn, what's going on in Capricorn, it's in all of us, whether you're a Capricorn or not. Whether you don't have to have a Capricorn sun or moon or rising sign to have this going on inside of you. Regardless of your sign, you have what this Cancer phenomenon going on inside of you now with the North Node there. And you have this opposition to everything going on in Capricorn is also going on inside of you. So this intensity of Pluto and Capricorn is inside of you somehow, working its way out, telling a story. It's contributing to how your life unfolds and to how you make decisions. And Saturn conjuncting Pluto in January 2020, that's going on inside of you. Just as much as it is up in the heavens or around you in your life, it's inside. And then later when Jupiter conjuncts Pluto, that's all inside of you. So this kind of interesting phenomenon and process is going on inside of you at all times. And I encourage everyone to try to do things like meditation, journaling, things that put you more in touch with this part of you that's more like something akin to your subconscious and unconscious mind. it's stuff happening beneath the surface. It's not happening for us like in that part of the brain that gets us up on time, helps us make breakfast, gets us to work on time or to school on time. That's just like this little teeny part of our brain that does that, keeps us going, keeps us showing up, keeps us remembering, how to get places and how to organize things. That's just a teeny tiny part of who we are, a teeny tiny part of our brain. And then there's this whole other part of our knowledge base that has nothing to do with that. And it's in that area where all this is going on. All this astrology is being worked out inside of you and unfolding in a certain way. You can get clues in your chart if you figure out what house Capricorn falls in, if you figure out what house Cancer falls in. You want to be thinking of Cancer as your North Star, as, true north on a compass. And you want to think of Capricorn as the past. And what's happening in Capricorn, we do need to understand the past. We do need to understand how we got here. We do need to understand all that data. But where we're headed, if we're following the astrology well, is toward this North Node in Cancer over this time. And it's setting up now. So everything happening now in your life, all the decisions you're making, all the yearnings, desires, little glimmers of intuition, all of that's this astrology talking to you inside of you. It's the energy of Pluto talking to you. It's the energy of the North Node. It's the energy of the South Node. It's all like little whispers inside of you, guiding you, showing you the way. So whenever you can make a decision between being like the past, doing things the old way, and trying something new that seems more gentle and more nurturing and more compassionate and more not just about you. It is about you definitely taking care of yourself, but how to nurture others. How do we nurture those around us? How do we nurture people in our town? How do we nurture people on the planet? It's as big as that, and it's as small as just nurturing yourself. So it's not just about your family. This is a bigger message, and it takes a lot of courage and willingness to change. And I don't know exactly what we're walking toward or how we're supposed to change, but I know that it has something to do with following the guide of Cancer and not following the guide of Capricorn. But we are supposed to be able to read Capricorn like a book, like a history book, and see what isn't. And there'll be things playing out on the world stage and in our lives that show us what not to do. And so when that's happening, it's so hard to know what to do. Like, a lot of people know what they're against, but they don't know really what they're for. Especially in the U.S., and I know it's pretty much the same everywhere. We've got these two main political parties, and so each party knows it's against what the other party is doing, and it's against, in the worst sense, it's against everyone in the other party. There's this just huge high polarization where people know what they're against, but they don't really have a clear vision of what they're for, and how to get there. They may think they know it, like, I'm for peace and I'm for goodwill and I'm for, I don't know. They could make a kind of a silly vapid list, but they don't know how to get there. It's not a silly list. Peace is not silly. Clean water is not silly. I would like clean water and make sure we have a continuing source of clean water, but I don't know how we get there. I mean, I get confused. I can think I know, but I don't really know. The world's very complex right now. And we need to find a new way to guide ourselves forward. We can't do it with information only. And that's where we've got, like, Capricorn is this big book of information about the past and all the data that's out there, words, books, knowledge. That's Capricorn and all this activity, but that's the back end of the arrow. It's informative, but what guides us forward really and helps us set our course is something much more internal and intuitive. And we need to learn how to tap into that intuitive, true north. And that's where, remember I was saying what will become important is our connection to that which is greater than us, bigger than us, like nature or God or the universe, however you think about your spirituality. That is what's going to help guide us. And we have to learn how to tune in. And it's through Cancer energy and this kind of self-nurturing and taking a more nurturing approach to leadership and stepping into our own leadership. It has something to do with that. I don't have all the answers. I just know that the front end of the arrow is pointing away from all the intensity in Capricorn. So while I do think we need to read Capricorn like a book, a history book, so that we understand how we got here, I think the direction we head in is toward Cancer. So look in your chart to see. It'll be interesting to see which houses these fall into. Well, let's see. Maybe we'll do a quick assessment. So I'll start, whenever I do a kind of a universal reading for everybody, I start with Aries in the first house. And so for Aries out there, Aries people, we have Capricorn up in the 10th house of often career, what's happening in your outer world, your self-image. It's sort of the authoritarian leadership style. It's like the CEO. It's the top-down kind of model, and this is really history. This will become ancient history, and this is what's being emphasized. This part's almost getting more intense before it dissipates. But it's what's visible. It's image related. It's material possession related. Not that I think there's anything wrong with material possessions. I mean, we all need certain things or enjoy certain things, but it is a part of our past. It's becoming quickly a part of our past. And for Aries, Cancer is down in the 4th house of home, our roots, our family. So it could be the family we grew up in. It could be the family we're creating biologically by having children or whatnot. But it's also the family we create with friends or adopting kids. It's where we choose to live and how we choose to live, how we choose to set up our homes and live out our daily lives from our homes. That is very important. It's also an area of the chart that has a lot to do with starting your own business, something I'm very passionate about. So it's more like, how can I, why do I want to get a job in a huge company that has a leader when I could be a leader? That's a question I would encourage all of you to ask of yourselves. And really take it, be willing to let that question kind of spin around, even if at first you're like, no, I don't want to be that. Be open to it. Because this can be a place where you start your own business down here in Cancer in the 4th house. It's like a startup company area. It's about land and land use. And we're going to need to pay more attention. It's about our water supply. It's the land use and water use around our homes. So there is something about water there. And it's deeply psychological. Rather than focusing on the surface of things, how things appear in image, it's understanding psychology and healing psychology, and how psychological influences can really impact us either adversely or positively. And we need to understand psychology. We need to understand mental health and mental wellness and the continuum and what compromises mental wellness. I like to, rather than calling it mental health, I like to think of it more holistically like wellness. You know, what can that include and look like? It can look many different ways. And so can mental illness can look many different ways and on a continuum. You know, sometimes it doesn't look very severe, sometimes it looks very severe. But it's like we increasingly need to understand that and take a look at our own wellness picture on a psychological level. That's going to become very important. And we need to understand that. So that's for Aries. Let me quickly, I have to put on my funny glasses. You get to see my red glasses here. So let's change it. We'll go sign by sign. This is sort of a long one, but okay, we'll go Taurus. So for Taurus, Capricorn takes up the 9th house, and this is like because it's Capricorn, it's like old style philosophy, old time religion. So these are the old world structures, universities, and we've seen this coming for a while. You see the university system kind of breaking down slowly and altering into something else that looks different from the way it did even 20 years ago. So university systems, church systems, you know, the seat of power in the church, the seat of power in learning, the seat of power in knowledge is all shifting. And it's shifting from these larger institutional settings to the individual once again. And for that to work, we all need, once again, to kind of assume authority over our own ideas and not let other people tell us what to think and not look to larger institutions to tell us how to be. And all of us need to do this together to realize we each can be our own authority. And then, so that's the back end of the arrow, is like all these larger institutions. The front end of the arrow is Cancer in the 3rd house for Taurus, and that would mean, you know, kind of what I was saying is bringing learning down to something more attainable for everybody on a smaller level, that you don't have to look at going for, and I've always been a big fan of college and getting graduate degrees. I'm such a school junkie, but more and more you can still learn a lot, but it may be more online learning kind of self-designing how you learn, and not just being told you need to learn this, this, and this to be able to do this other thing. You decide what you want to learn. You can cobble together your own equivalent of a degree, and that's going to make a lot of people very unhappy because a lot of reaction to this may be something like, well, you can't trust like the average person to know what to learn. How could they possibly know what to learn? How could they possibly educate themselves? And this is where each one of us has to take responsibility for that. We need to understand that learning is important, but we can put our own degree, equivalent of a degree, together. We can learn where our passion and intuition kind of guides us, and a lot of people are going to think that's not learning at all, just the sound of it, because it's so different. It's not like what we're used to. It's not like what the past looks like for learning and knowledge and being quote-unquote smart, and being able to move forward in the world. But we're moving towards something very different. It's going to happen rapidly at some point. Right now we're kind of building up, And it's good to just kind of get a sense for where we're headed. It's going to look very different. So that is Taurus. So let's see, funny glasses again. So Gemini. All right, Gemini. So you have Capricorn in the 8th house of larger financial institutions, banking systems, governments, just governmental money, banking systems, the stock market, real estate, larger, bigger forms of money, bigger systems of money than just the money that you earn each day and spend each day. It's the bigger stuff. And again, in your chart, it's governed by Capricorn. So when you combine Capricorn with that, it's, the old way of banking, money, finance, it's all changing. So, it'll seem at some point in time like a blink of an eye. It's just going to change. And so what do? You look toward the North Node in your 2nd house where Cancer is, and you figure out for yourself how you're going to manage your money on a small scale. Don't get too caught up. Don't look to the larger banking institutions. Don't look to the talking heads about the stock market. Don't rely on that. Start really focusing more on what you can do on your own and how you manage your own money. And you nurture your money. You go toward how you can earn it. You can still maybe invest, but it's going to be a very different kind of investment. It's more like investing in yourself. So there's something here more about investing in yourself. I think even something like, well, I won't do it in this segment because we're going to get to the 6th house where Capricorn's in the 6th house. So, but here it's just really looking at how you yourself could create wealth, just you alone. You don't need those larger institutions. You don't need to think about all that. All of that's going to rapidly change and sometimes even just crumble. So what can you do? How can you secure yourself? And how can you nurture yourself and your town and, your country in a different way where each person is responsible for him or herself? But still in a nurturing way of themselves, but also each other. So it's not a rampant individualism. It's not about being, rogue and just, out there on your own and everybody for him or herself. It's not that, because there's this nurturing quality. And Cancer is not just about the self, but about everybody. So it is taking into account the whole and not just the individual. So that is Gemini. Let's see. So of course next we have Cancer. So Cancer, it's all about you. For you, the South Node and Capricorn and all the craziness is going on in relationships and partnerships. And it's very relationship oriented. So in a larger sense, this is about the institutions of marriage. And the way we look at marriage and long-term partnership is rapidly changing, of course. And we see evidence of this all the time. And this will continue. The trajectory is toward it breaking down even further and radically transforming. We can't stop it as individuals or as political groups. We can't change what's happening to marriage and the way we look at love. That it's going to change, and we just, I think, need to get on board with the program. And it's going to change, and we need to accept. And the emphasis is far more on the individual and what the individual needs. It's the North Node in Cancer, so you kind of lead the way, like your own energy leads the way, and how to move forward as individuals, just finding love and expressing love, receiving love. It's going to look more individualized and less institutionalized. So that's another big shift. I think a lot of people see that happening. You can see all of this happening, really. So now we have Leo. All right, Leo. So you have Capricorn in the 6th house of health. And so here's where we talk about health. So health institutions, the healthcare, insurance, the way we look to doctors and larger institutions to and pharmaceutical companies to come up with the answers. The power structures are crumbling, and we can't stop it, really. It's just happening. And what we do has something to do with Cancer, in your case, in the 12th house. So this is where we use, and I know it's going to sound very foreign, and it's even stuff that I used to think was really wacky, like using your intuition to heal yourself, or figuring out for yourself how to heal yourself. It used to just seem like, well, that could go really wrong. But it's really learning a new way to assess our healing powers, our own individual healing powers, and maybe even to help others heal by accessing our intuition. And I know it can sound a little wacky, and I don't even know what this is going to look like either. I'm just reading the chart, but we access our intuition and our connection to spirit, whatever that feels like to us. So it's like praying and maybe recognizing the power of prayer and guided visualization, intuition, finding new ways to use the power of that. There are actual scientific studies that show the power. There is power there, and they don't fully understand it. They can't really explain it, but there are studies that show prayer is quite powerful and healing. And the subject who needs healing might not even know people are praying for him or her, and still they heal more quickly and recover more quickly. So there's something about that too, where the old institutions, people saying, well, you need this pill, you do what we tell you, only we who have gone to school for X number of years can tell you what to do, and looking to them for all the answers, we go more inward and use, kind of a higher power. And to me, like, you have to understand, it's at one point in time I was headed for medical school, so a part of me is like, this sounds so whacked out, I get how that can sound that way, but I'm reading the chart. That's what the chart says, that these institutions are crumbling. All the institutions are crumbling. So we're just going through them one by one. You will find that they are all crumbling. Okay, so now we're going to go to Virgo. Virgo. Okay, so Virgo, you have Capricorn in your 5th house. So this is where all the action is. And so this is a little trickier. Let me see if I can figure out. So the structures crumbling here have to do with children. So what it means to have a child, how you have a child, the way science can help, the way you could adopt. A lot here is crumbling, but even just the idea of who one's child is. Remember, we're all pointed toward Cancer, which is really mother to all. And so there's this sense of, it's not just, oh, you have a child and you have a child and there's some children over there who are starving somewhere, they're not mine, they're too far away. So this notion of caring for children and where we get them, who owns them or cares for them. Not owns, but we get rid of people owning kids. But structures around children and the way we even think of children, and how I don't know. It's like how they're treated by society, how they're even created. That's like what's coming to me. It's how their children are even created. All that's getting very blurry and crumbling, which is it's hard to understand what this one looks like. But the future is Cancer up in the 11th house. So this is like the new frontier, and this is a new frontier of nurturing, a new frontier of parenting. And this is the frontier. The 11th house is the frontier of the chart. We don't know what it looks like. It's going to be a surprise. Just like it's very foggy to me, but I know it has to do with how children are created and how we parent. It's all changing. And you can kind of see that with the changing of marriage relationship and love. You see, same-sex marriages with children, right? So it looks very different. So it's along those lines, but there's more that I can't fully comprehend here. It's going to be a surprise. So it's the old idea of leadership over children and how we think of them and their contribution to us and to society. And I think they'll be taken more seriously in their opinions and concerns, and what they offer is taken more seriously, something like that. I mean, I'm getting total intuition because I don't know it's going to be the new frontier. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but that from a Virgo point of view, that's what's changing the most, perhaps. So we'll move on to Libra. And so you may be wondering at this point, well, this sounds so big. It's not something in my life, but it is. Somehow you, like Virgos, will be very much in the forefront of, like Virgos themselves, Virgo moons, rising, suns will be somehow much more a part of the process of changing how parenting looks. They'll be more, you'll find Virgos active in this somehow. I don't know. But sign by sign, you'll find you're more invested in the parts that I'm talking about, the parts of the chart. And it'll trickle down to your own individual life, but I don't know how. It's big stuff that's happening right now. So here's Libra. So, Libra. Capricorn hits the part of your chart that has to do with home, what home looks like. What home looks like to Libra is crumbling rapidly. Institutions of home, family, what family looks like, these structures are dissolving. And so in your personal life, you'll see this too. It's not just societal, but it's also true that on a societal level, our notion of home and family is dissolving. And there's a pull, I know, right now toward nationalism and kind of protectionism and sealing the borders. But what the chart says here is that will be dissolving and we won't be able to stop it. And then on the other side of the chart where the North Node is, the North Node is pointing toward Cancer in the 10th house. And this is kind of harkens back to what I was talking about before, where really leadership will start to look more and more like something entirely different. And the way we lead families, the way we parent, the way we lead countries, the way we lead others, in any arena, the way we lead, will look much more like Cancer leadership. And that will be more nurturing and compassionate. It will be more concerned with people's individual welfare, down to what nutrition each person has. Because it's a water sign, it has to do with clean water for all, and maybe, I don't know. This is all very, very new. And none of us, not even, I can't tell you what it looks like, but I just know what's crumbling and where we need to head based on the chart alone. And I get a few intuitive hits, but that's what's going on with Libra. So Libras as individuals, just like all the signs as individuals, will have this playing out in their own individual lives, but also will be contributing to informing the rest of the planet what this looks like. So Libras, you're showing people like the new way of defining family, the new way of defining home or your home base. I don't know. A lot of you may be building communes or just developing something communes are actually kind of old. So not even that. It's some whole new way of doing things that we haven't seen yet. We just don't even know. But you'll be very caught up in that movement. And it may not feel like a movement in your own life. It'll just feel like your life for a lot of you. But you're also kind of showing the way forward. Remember, we're all leaders now, and we're learning how to become leaders, each person, each one of you. And now we go to Scorpio. So Scorpio, you have Capricorn in the 3rd house. So institutions of teaching young children, so the way elementary school, preschool, grade school, that's all changing and crumbling. What we think we need to learn, or what our kids need to learn, is changing. Maybe our kids teach us. There's this whole something changing with our relationship to children, but all these institutions that have to do with grade school and learning at a younger level will change. The way we think of towns and cities and counties and our neighborhoods, all of that's going to change on a very deep level. So the way we define ourselves, because a lot of us define ourselves like I personally grew up in Atlanta, so I'm from Atlanta originally, and I live in this neighborhood, that has a certain name, or I'm, whatever political party you are, or whatever, denomination and church you are. These definitions are all shifting and changing and crumbling. They'll be meaningless. So, or they'll have very different meanings. We'll identify differently, and it's more about the individual and less about the group. But again, not in a maverick, riding off into the sunset unto yourself and only looking after yourself kind of way. It's just that we see each other all as individuals with power. We're equal power, equal worth. That will be where we're headed. And so Cancer, the North Node in your chart, Scorpio, is up in the 9th house. So here we have a very nurturing, softer, nurturing kind of approach to philosophy, religion, political view, the way we see the world, the way we talk to each other from a distance, the way we travel will be very different. Even the way we travel will be very different. The way we travel long distances. We'll see. But it has more to do with nurturing, caring for people, maybe nurturing the water. I don't know if we're traveling by water, but certainly the way we think of higher education, it's more like the thing that springs into my mind is what they do in Germany, for example, or England. I don't know about everywhere in Europe, but they're more likely to kind of help you see where you're. I mean, I don't know if this is true across the board, but the way I hear it is, they'll kind of assess, what you're good at, where you excel, and you can choose kind of, different tracks. And you might go to university for 2 years, for 4 years, but you'll go more into kind of a profession, apprentice role or apprentice track. I don't know how to describe it. You guys know how to describe it if you're in Europe. But it's not like in the United States and elsewhere in the world, there's this idea that you grow up, you pick a college, you pay tons of money, and you come out with this degree, and you've mostly had a liberal arts education, and then what? Something very different is happening here that's more nurturing toward the individual and the group, where the student is more nurtured through the process. I don't know. It's all going to look so new, and it has more to do with what each individual needs. Remember, we were saying before, each individual gets to choose what that individual learns. We have so much access to information and data and knowledge with the internet. As long as we have the internet, if the internet goes away, we'll have to learn differently. But it's going to look very different how we nurture people into adulthood, and the way you're brought into society as an adult. It's going to look very different. But if we're doing it right, it has a more nurturing quality, and it really takes into account what each individual needs or wants. So that's Scorpio. This takes a while. Here's Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, Capricorn takes up your second house, the way you earn a living, the way you spend money. So money coming in, money going out is rapidly changing. The old structures are dissolving. So the old ways, so for you as an individual, the old ways you used to earn money are dissolving, and just around you and beneath you, you can't control it. And a whole new way of making money and handling money and dealing with money is upon you. So there's a whole new way to earn, to make money, to spend money. And all the normal structures of earning money, like getting you go get a 9-to-5 job, you sit in a cubicle, or you stand behind a counter, or you answer a phone, or you're stuck in some room somewhere with no windows. That's all dissolving. And where you're headed with this is the North Node in the 8th house, so that means Cancer's there, ruling the 8th house. So it's far more intuitive. So there's this intuitive way to master, and it's very psychological. It's kind of what we were talking about before with the 12th house, North Node. It's more psychological, intuitive, and let's see. It's hard to find the words for things that are so new we've never seen them before. The financial system will look very different. It will be more the qualities of Cancer and North Node in Cancer. So it's more nurturing toward the individual. So tax structures, banking structures, they'll all dissolve and become much more focused around nurturing. Maybe we have our own, I don't know, or we all collectively develop something that works better for us. I don't know. It's so new. None of us knows what it looks like, so it's hard to even find the words. I get a feeling for it. I can kind of feel it, but it's hard to put it into words. But this is about a whole new financial system that's much more nurturing toward the group and the individual, and is more free flowing rather than rigid. That's the best I can do because this is all such new, we're entering such new territory. It's so hard to see it. And Capricorn. So Capricorn, there's nothing bad about you, Capricorn. It's not, as individuals, Capricorns are lovely people with lovely qualities, so don't feel like you're bad. It's just, in a larger sense, what Capricorn represents. It's the structures, especially when you apply it to society. But the structures in your life and the way you see yourself, Capricorn, all of that's dissolving. So it's like the rigid definitions of self. And we were kind of talking about this before with another sign, I forget which, where we were saying, we define ourselves a certain way, like on our resume, or on a dating website, or wherever we have, or LinkedIn, where we have to, or social media. It's just those little things we define, like I'm a graduate of blank, I majored in blank, I'm a fill in the blank, engineer, nurse, whatever. I am married, I am single, like all these ways we define ourselves. In a larger sense, in society, all these ways of defining self will be dissolving. And in your life right now, the way you define yourself is altering deeply, on a deep level. And you'll define yourself very differently over the next 2 years and beyond. The way you see yourself and how you identify will be very, very different. And then if we go over to Cancer in the 7th house in your case, with the North Node there, we're going toward relating to people in a much gentler way, in a nurturing way. And, I'm imagining a lot of Capricorns are like, well, I'm already very nurturing. And you are to some degree because you have Cancer in the 7th house. But it's like the emphasis is going off of you and more toward how you relate to others and the importance of others. And I imagine there are people out there, like, because I would be thinking, well, I do think of others. I do put importance on others and how they feel. And I do, I can imagine that, a lot of Capricorns would be thinking that or reacting that way. But there's something, maybe let's go societally. So remember we were talking about, back when we were on Cancer and talking about Cancer, we were talking about how larger institutions around relationships are dissolving and the old way of looking at relationships is dissolving. And so here, in your case, we're looking at the new way relationships are defined and formed, and something very new is happening in relationships. So in your just day-to-day life, this is happening, very new things happening, a new way of being with your partner, a new way of looking for a partner, a new way of being a friend, a new way of being a business partner. You're evolving into a more nurturing, caring, about each individual role. So again, when we go towards something that's so new, it's never happened before, it's hard to put it into words. But you will play a large part in dissolving ego and the self and self-identification, and you'll be helping us move toward nurturing all those important people in our lives and understanding relationships in an entirely new way that is more evolved and more compassionate, more nurturing. I wish I had a better word for nurturing. I'm going to have to think of something else, but for lack of anything else right at the moment, we'll go with that. But that's you're helping us do that, Capricorn. And again, Capricorns are lovely people. It's just on a like kind of global sense. It's the energy of Capricorn can tend to be like the harder structures, which are dissolving, larger systems. So, Aquarius. So Aquarius, you have Capricorn in your 12th house. So the old ways of thinking are dissolving for you. Old ways of, it's like thought patterns, old ways of thinking, old ways of connecting to your intuition, old ways of, or barriers to your intuition are dissolving. Barriers between you and spirit and whatever else bigger than us is dissolving. So it's like this gateway opening up kind of to whatever is out there that's bigger than us, the stuff we can't see, tangibly feel. We're all gaining more access to it because the barriers are dissolving. So the way we see the world is going to be totally different. The way we think about everything we touch, smell, taste, see, hear, we're going to have a very different understanding of what those things are. And it's like understanding, it's as basic as understanding that my glasses, for example, aren't truly solid. I'm not truly solid. These walls aren't truly solid. It's just the way we see it, right? There are other noises around me that my ears, I'm limited to my equipment. My eyes are equipment that have certain features, and they are only so powerful. My ears are only so powerful and can only pick up a certain range. And we grow up and we move through the world and we think that the limitation of our equipment shows us all, but really it's just a limitation in our equipment. There's so many more sounds that I just can't hear. There's so much more out there to see that I can't see because I have a limitation in my eye equipment. And even touch, I sense this is solid because of the limitation of my ability to feel that this isn't solid. So, it's a very heady thing, but something you'll be learning and feeling this more and more and more, opening up to this more and more personally. But also as a society, this is something we're going through. And the North Node in Cancer in the 6th house is showing you and the rest of us a new way to live day to day, a new way to have our schedule, a new way to take care of ourselves physically, new understanding of our body and what makes it well or not well, a new understanding of how to form relationships, like friendships or relating to other people, new ways of seeing other people. Like one way what popped into my mind is understanding we're not separate, like you're not separate from anyone else. You'll see people differently, perhaps not realizing that they're not different from you. They're actually you in some form. You just hadn't thought of it that way before. Something like that. Moving on to Pisces. So by the way, I have 2 courses coming up in January if you're interested. I'll put the links below. One is to help people learn how to do astrology as a coach. And the other is, oh my gosh, I'm so tired from this is intense to do this kind of movement, and then plus the subject matter is so intense. Oh, sorry. Okay, so one course. I'm also like manipulating the chart, doing too many things at once. So one is learning how to do astrology the way I do it as a coach, and learning how to merge those two things. It's a very basic beginner course because it's something that takes longer to learn, especially if it's not your norm. And then the other course is about looking at your astrology in the year, so your own birth chart and the year 2019, and looking for where in your chart, where it can help you start a business or learn something about how to grow your own business. So it's using astrology to help you either start a business or grow a business, and specifically in 2019. So, okay, Pisces. All right, Pisces. You have got Capricorn in the 11th house. And so the way you see the future and the way, you know how we kind of look out the future, we think we know what's going to happen, like basic stuff, like I'm going to grow up, I'm going to get older, I'll probably graduate school maybe, or maybe I'll get married, maybe I'll get a job, I imagine I'll live in the same country I live in. We have certain things we take for granted about what the future will be. This is all just dissolving. Again, the way the future, what we think the future will be, is going to look totally different. All the things we think we know, dissolving and right before our eyes. Especially structures around the future. Even the way we see time. We're going to have, I think, so many probably scientific insights and breakthroughs that show us a whole different way of seeing the world and everything in the universe. So I think a lot of scientific discovery will show us how all the structures we thought were a certain way are actually nothing like what we thought. And the science community's been waiting for this. So I think that's going to happen. And then across the way, down in the 5th house, there's this Cancer in the 5th house with the North Node is approaching how to have fun, how to play, how to parent, how to be in romance. Very different, more flowy, free-flowing, less rigidity around parenting, less rigidity around romance. And we see this in different ways. There's so many books about parenting with many different styles. So all of this is already kind of happening, but it'll be more radical in the years to come. And even with romance, you see, it's just like with relationships. There's so many experimental ways to be in a romantic relationship. That's all changing. And the way we flirt or date, that's all been rapidly changing. But it's going to change even more. The structures around, let's just take dating, for example. Like dating websites, or even asking people on dates, or ads, or whatever the structures are going to dissolve, and there's this more free-flowing, less rigid way to connect to people. But you see it, and people are just making very different choices, and some people are dating 2 people at once, and everybody accepts that, and maybe even different genders, and everybody's fine with that, and so we already see it. It's not totally new. Some of the stuff we see as it's reforming, but like a new way to parent that's more nurturing and takes the individual into account. I think we will be looking at children more seriously, taking each child and their opinion and their talents more seriously, not from a sense of the helicopter parent who well, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm up on the lingo, but the kind of parent who's like, my child's talented, my child's advanced, my child needs to be in, the classroom or with the teacher or at the school that's the most advanced because my child's special. I mean, I speak as someone who sent my kids to private school, so maybe I'm making fun of myself, but that was based, my desire to do that was based in part on knowing what was I thought was to come, which would be going to college and then picking a profession, and more linear thinking around what a child needed to be successful. They needed to be a part of these institutions that guided them to more institutions and that guided them into even more institutions where all these other people make determinations about that poor little child who just really needs to live and be themselves. I think of it very differently now. So I do think this is already unfolding even for me. I see it differently now from this side of parenting, being older and looking back. I see it very differently. So I think what we used to think of as a linear pathway for a child to success is we're going to look at that totally differently. Creativity is going to enter a whole new renaissance and be very different. And again, we can't quite see that yet. I'm sure there are artists out there, and if I thought long enough, I could probably find examples. Well, you actually do see it when you go around to museums and stuff or go to performances. There are new things happening, and things are blurring and blending and not as rigid in how we identify, like this is a painting or this is a piece of music. There's a blurring and blending of these things, so they have the old definitions don't apply. So, that was a lot. I hope that was interesting for you. Actually, going through sign by sign was very interesting for me, but very exhausting because this is big, guys. We all know the world's going to change. This new age of data, the new economy, we see world structures already crumbling and changing and altering. And, I think it's just easy just to try to not look at it too much because it's so big. So we really broke it down there, guys. That's the North Node and the South Node. And if you're interested in the courses coming up in January, please email me if you have questions. You can ping me on Facebook, and I'll put links below with the course names and also how you find readings. All right, I think I'm done for the evening. Take care, guys.